Today is Friday, December 13th, 2024. This is Quick Start from CBN News. I'm Dan Andros. The White House security official tries to explain these drone sightings over New Jersey, and people are not thrilled with the answer. We'll have that top story and more on today's podcast, where we're bringing you news from a Christian perspective. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a rating. You can email us as well, quickstartpodcast@cbn.org. Joining me now to get through the news of the Cray each and every weekday as we do bright and early. CBN's Billy Hallowell, Trey Goins-Phillips. A lot to get to, gentlemen, as always. On the focus story, we've got an update on the Satanic Temple story.
Yeah, we had a chance to sit down with Joel Penton from LifeWise Academy to get his reaction to the Satanists targeting his interesting religious program. So we'll get into all of that.
All right, looking forward to the update there. On the main thing, Trey, you caught up with Emily Compagno to talk about her new book, Under His Wings.
Yeah, so the whole book is kind of a catalog of different stories from people in combat zones and how their faith encouraged them during those trying times. So it was a good conversation.
All right, looking forward to that on the main thing. Make sure you subscribe to all of our CBN News podcasts, DC Debrief with John Stolnis, Newsmakers from Billy, and also from Billy, we've got this new podcast, Jesus and the Prophecies of Christmas. Episode 2 will be on this feed tomorrow on Saturday. You'll be able to catch that here, but you can also follow that feed with the link in the description of this podcast episode if you want to catch those. 4-part series leading up to Christmas. You don't want to miss that. All right, we are going to head now to the news in 90 seconds. And the Biden administration suggested there may be no drones over New Jersey after all, as it sought to tamp down growing frustration over a lack of answers from the feds over reported several sightings of large drones that may be car-sized. We've not been able to, and neither have state and local law enforcement authorities, been able to corroborate any of the reported visual sightings. White House National Security Communications Advisor John Kirby told reporters during a briefing yesterday. He said, upon review of available imagery, it appears many of the reports of sightings are actually manned aircraft that are being operated lawfully. A new report from DOJ Inspector General Michael Horowitz reveals there were 26 confidential human sources in the crowd on January 6, 2021, but only 3 were assigned by the FBI to be present. He emphasized and said that none of these FBI sources were authorized or directed to enter restricted areas, break the law, or encourage illegal acts during the Capitol breach. Those are just some of today's top headlines. You can check out more stories over at cbnnews.com. And that was an interesting admission there that 26 undercover sources basically from the federal government were at the January 6th rallies there that ended up turning into people spilling into the Capitol. And a lot of people accused for a lot of time that there were feds, that there was video of people flashing badges and things like that. And so this is very interesting. They were actually trying to tamp down those theories, but I think they're going to make it, I think, heat up a little bit. But I really wanted to go back to the drone story here, guys, because this is quite remarkable now. They essentially said, no, you're just seeing things, and we don't know what's up with that. And the only things we do know is just manned aircraft that are being operated lawfully. You think anyone's buying that?
No, it's not making sense. Again, they either don't know what it is or they know what it is and they don't want to say it. And I think either option at this point is not great because you've got lots of people reporting this. To me, it's like pretty simple. So what is it? Who are these manned aircraft? Why are they not coming forward? Why have we not heard from them? So it could be a military thing. I mean, who knows what it is? I just find it annoying and bizarre that they won't actually just tell us.
Yeah, I think this whole story is just bizarre, right? It just kind of feels like a Twilight Zone kind of thing. Like they're not there to they are there, but they're not a threat to, no, you're just kind of making things up. There's nothing to be worried about to, well, they are there, but they're just people who are lawfully flying drones. So I think it's on top of the fact that it's kind of weird to begin with, the fact that the White House or the government response has been really all over the place from the beginning of this, I think is what's raising all the questions, right? It would be one thing if they kind of said this is what it is and they stuck with it. But the fact that the explanation changes from day to day, depending on who from the government you're hearing from, raises some, I think, legitimate questions about it.
Yeah. And I saw, look, some people in the comment section, we are now also posting this podcast on the CBN News YouTube channel. So we're getting more people that are finding this podcast from that. And I saw some of the comments that were responding to our discussion of this yesterday. And a few people were like, you can buy drones that can carry up to 100 pounds. And so, yeah, people can buy it, because I kind of said these weren't the types of things that are. First of all, the drone I think this person is referring to, because I looked it up, is a $20,000 drone. But still, it's not that big. It's only like itself 90 pounds. It's a large drone, but it's nowhere near the size of a car. It's designed to carry, like, I don't know, 80 to 100 pounds or something in a box. It has just little hooks, and it's pretty cool, actually. And it carries it onto remote areas. So if somebody's stuck somewhere and they need, in a mountain, and they need a delivery of supplies to save their life, they could do it. But that's not a car. Like, this is completely different. And so, they're trying to brush this off, say as either nothing or this is completely legal activity. So we'll see what pans out. But, listen, yeah. I'm a little bit skeptical on the answer when it's like, nah, it's nothing to see here, guys. Just move along.
I think it's interesting to see the differences in responses from people, right? Like John Kirby is saying there's essentially nothing to see here, move on. And then Richard Blumenthal, a senator from Connecticut, a Democrat, said we should be doing some very urgent intelligence analysis and take them out of the skies, especially if they're flying over airports or military bases. Yeah. So it's a mixed response from our government completely, which I think just adds to the confusion over all of this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And look,
which seems unacceptable. It's unacceptable. Right. I just don't. I do think it's interesting that you have congressmen and congresswomen who are more concerned, right, and asking these questions, which is what they should be doing. Everybody in government should be doing that. This very well could be nothing, but they're fueling speculation that it's something by incompetently handling it, which unfortunately has been something we've seen too common. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll see how this thing pans out. But I mean, right now, there's just a lot more questions than answers at this point. So we'll keep an eye on it for you. And right now, though, we're going to go over to the main, not the main thing, actually. I'm getting ahead of myself. That's coming up here in a few minutes. We're going to the focus story, and we've got an update on the Satanic Temple's release time story. What's the update here, Billy?
Yeah, so we had a chance to speak with the guy who actually created LifeWise. LifeWise is the Christian organization that allows kids to leave their schools during the day, go to a church or a separate location during lunchtime or a free period, learn about Jesus, and then go back, get bused back to the school. Trey did a story on this, earlier this month. We had a chance to talk with Joel Penton. Again, he's the founder of the Christian group LifeWise, and he really got into this issue of why. Why are the Satanists doing what they're doing? Now, they have created something called HAL, and it's the Hellion Academy of Independent Learning, as we've talked about on the show. And this is their alternative to this Christian program. So apparently in a couple of schools, at least two that we know of, these young people can leave their elementary school and get bused to learn about Satanism, right? To learn about whatever it is they want to teach. And of course, we're going to do the reminder that we did on the show earlier this week. The Satanic Temple claims to not believe in Satan. So they're claiming to teach children really uplifting and positive things about loving one another and all of that in this program they have. But Joel said that the messages are really confusing about why they're doing this. He said the messages that we're getting, they range everything from that it's an explicit attempt to scare school boards and communities into shutting down all religious programs, He said, and then they also have seen responses that say, hey, don't be scared. We're teaching kindness and values and all those sorts of things. And so he said it's not super clear why the Satanists are doing what they're doing, but he does have some theories on what might be going on there. And one of them, from his perspective, is to specifically and explicitly counter the Christian programming, right? You can't stop this organization because it's growing, this Christian group. And so what are they doing? They're creating their own alternatives in the process. So he had a lot of thoughts on that, which was interesting to hear him break down, honestly.
What do you think is driving this effort?
Yeah, so, okay, that was one that I just mentioned. I think the other one, and this is interesting, he brought up the fact in Ohio, that's where LifeWise was created. It was created in Ohio in 2019 with just 2 schools. Okay, they were present in just 2 schools with this Christian, organization. They have grown, and we'll get into some of those numbers after. But he thinks that as a result of the growth, you also have this other issue that Ohio is apparently weighing a law that would require schools to allow for release time. What release time is the ability that a school district gives for parents to say, hey, we want our kids bust out to learn about religion during the day. We want them in the public schools to be able to do that. So when a district allows for release time, they then will open that up for different religious groups to do this. In Ohio, they're about to make that mandatory. Currently, the law says that the districts may provide, this release time. The law would be changed if this passes, and it's under House Bill 8. It would actually say that they shall, which means it's a mandate that the school districts have to allow this in the state of Ohio. Other states already have it that way. There are certain states where it is required that school districts cannot say no to a group like LifeWise or to the Satanic Temple for that matter. And so because of that law that's currently making its way through, he said this might be a last minute effort to try to stop or delay that legislation. Remember, if you create chaos in a community, right? You have this Christian group, everyone's happy. You bring in the atheists, the Satanists, whoever. Now the districts might be like, you know what? This is too much. We don't want to deal with it. We're not going to allow release time at all. So that was one of the theories he offered. And I thought it was pretty interesting, honestly.
Does Penton plan to try and stop the Satanist Hail effort or what?
So, okay, no. And I mentioned in 2019, I'll just start here really quickly. 2019, he had those 2 groups. In 2020, obviously COVID hit, and here they are with this in-person organization they're trying to start. He had a goal in 2020. He said, look, I want to reach 25 schools by 2025. Which is pretty ambitious, right? But by 2024, LifeWise exceeded that goal. They have hit 600 schools in 31 states this year. So his view is, look, he knows what it takes to make that happen. He knows how difficult it is. He actually said he would love to have a conversation with the Satanists and those who make these arguments. He said he's never really had the opportunity to do that, to have an honest conversation. But what he said was, he doesn't want them to take parents' rights away to educate their kids the way they see fit. And he's like, look, they are free to create their own programs. It's a tough task. He said, we'll see how it works out with the Satanists. And I just want to read this quote because it made me laugh. He said, if another group wants to do the same thing, then we say, hey, go buy your big black Satan bus, probably with flames on the side, and, pull up beside our big red LifeWise bus, and we'll see how many kids get on which bus. So I thought that was a great response. He's like, look, it's the First Amendment. Do what you want to do.
Yeah, no, absolutely great. And, and I think, again, it speaks to the sort of disingenuous nature of the effort that they don't really want to have a conversation there. You see some of those bumper stickers around that just say, live and let live and all this stuff. Well, that doesn't appear what groups like this satanic group really want. What they want to do is just shut down the Christian group. They're not happy that there's a Christian group there. And so they can't think of another way to get it shut down. And so they are just trying to do this because they're hoping people go, oh, gosh, that is bad. Like you said, they're causing chaos. The effect is people go, oh, wait a minute. I liked it when it was the thing I liked. But now with all these crazy things coming in, maybe we need to shut it down. And that seems to be what the effort is. And it's just totally disingenuous. And I think people would be fine with other groups, like we said, like a Muslim group or some other religious group, right? If they wanted to have their own club. And then that gives people a chance to have a conversation about why you should go to different clubs and which ones you should go to.
Yep,
Yeah, I
yep.
think it's
And by the way, I just want to add one last thing. When you go to the press release that the Satanic Temple put out about Hal, they make it very clear that it is a reaction to LifeWise, right? So whether they're out there saying different things, this in part is a reaction to these groups. And again, they're free to do it, but that is why they're doing it, it seems.
I think it's kind of a tricky one because it's like you don't want to give them so much attention that they end up becoming the news because that's kind of their goal, right? So you just kind of, it's better just to, in some ways, it's better, let me just ignore you and you can do whatever you want to do and be as obnoxious as you want to be because it's not impacting my freedom of speech and I'm not going to want to infringe on yours because then I don't want anybody coming after mine. I think there's some level of that that's good. But then I also think that it's worth calling out that this is essentially just the one kid at the playground who's being a bully and a jerk, and they're going to ruin the fun for everybody else. And I think that's
Yeah.
the goal, right? That's
Yeah.
the goal of these so-called Satanist groups is just to ruin let's get rid of the free speech for everybody.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think calling attention to that is good, but also at the same time, it's like, if you're gonna do what you're gonna do, I'm not going to infringe on your right to do it as long as you just leave me alone. Let the Christians meet, and if you want to do this silly little protest, go for it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's a similar motive to
Yeah,
the separation of church and state arguments we hear from
right.
FRF all the time, right? Like it's only at the Christian groups do they get all upset and they want to try to find a way, but they lose so many of those cases that maybe they're tired of losing, and maybe other groups are trying different avenues. But we'll keep an eye on it for sure. It's definitely interesting, and we're praying for Joel and other groups like him, like their efforts in these schools, because it's definitely a worthy cause to be evangelizing in that sphere. All right, we are gonna head to the main thing now. Fox News host Emily Compagno sat down with Trey to talk about her new book, Under His Wings, a collection of stories of faith from the battlefield. Emily shared some of her own family background, how she saw the Lord work through several stories, and what encouraged her over the course of writing the book. Conversation is today's main thing.
Tell us a little bit about the book and what inspired your interest in the topic.
Well, it's truly the utmost honor of my life to serve as a messenger for what frankly are extraordinary voices within this very special book. I detail the incredibly intimate experiences that warfighters have had with God and their faith on the battlefield, and also what that battlefield looks like. That in the wake of, for example, the global war on terror, that the battlefield might be the home front, might be the home. Through my mother's genealogical work, she's our family historian, we have records and photographs and stories through generations through World War I. And so those two are in the book. And in 2009, I was an NFL cheerleader for the then Oakland Raiders and visited the troops in Iraq and Kuwait. Had an amazing experience there. And while there, had a sort of exceptional evening where we became stranded in Sadr City, which even going to Sadr City alone raised a lot of eyebrows, and ended up our Black Hawk Out was diverted for a medevac. So we spent all night there. We called it the Sadr City Slumber Party. And the kind colonel there, I'll never forget, he said, I have 3 daughters at home, so I'm not going to sleep until you girls are safely out of here. And we spent all night hanging out with the soldiers in the courtyard. We called it the camp that I mentioned, the slumber party, Sadr City Slumber Party. And so when the eventually Black Hawk came back in the wee hours of the morning, we ran out with barely a proper goodbye and thank you. But it was such a special night to have with those guys. And 3 days later, Colonel Karcher drove over an IED. He lost his legs. And on the way back from his medevac, the men drove over another IED, and Sergeant Timothy David lost his life. And he was younger than I was. It was his 6th tour of duty. So all of those stories are in the book, interwoven through the theme of faith, and again, of these intimate experiences these warfighters had with God and faith. For, as Colonel Karcher says, God promised me eternal life, not eternal legs.
You come from a long history of military service. Your great aunt was in the military. Talk a little bit about some of her service and how the letters that you read of hers revealed a faith that kind of served as a guidepost for her through her time serving.
Thank you for that. So, yes, it was my great great aunt Luella Cochran, and she was a nurse in the U.S. Army Nurse Corps. She deployed for 16 months during World War II. In fact, sailing out from here, from where I sit right now, from New York Harbor, with the 125th Hospital Expeditionary Unit on the Monarch, the USS Monarch. And her letters home, she wrote home frequently and with very detailed descriptions of what life was like on the front lines for a female nurse in World War II. And my family saved those letters and they saved her photographs. And her first letter home, for example, said, "No, not to worry, Mom. I went to communion. I went to service on Sunday. All is well." But the reality is, her mom had cause to worry because she had buried her son in the prior World War. Luella's brother, my great great uncle, and my great great grandmother, Rosa, so the mom, had sailed across in 1930 with Calvin Coolidge's Gold Star Mother Pilgrimage. That was a program funded by Congress for a few years that brought these Gold Star mothers and widows to Europe to visit their buried loved ones who had made the ultimate sacrifice. So we have photos of Aunt Lou in her nurse's uniform visiting her brother's grave there in Suresnes twice. We have photos of her wearing a surgical mask. Her first procedure there as an anesthetist nurse was a leg amputation. And she talked about bringing the troop morale up and being there for the soldiers. She described one Christmas where she and the other nurses sort of scoured around to make sure every soldier had a small Christmas gift. They went outside into the trees and cut off boughs to make sure that the common areas were decorated, because she said she wanted to bring just some cheer during this wartime. And talked about going to services, funeral processions in France for the French, who were our allies, and described the comfort that it brought and the allyship between the Americans and France and the British. She was in England too. She was in England, France, and Germany. So the level of detail and insight that her letters served, and always touching on faith, always touching on going to church, on inspiring the men to come to service with her or simply to talk about it bedside, was really incredible. And it again, I credit my mother with my whole heart of gratitude for telling me these stories and saving these letters and sharing this with our family so that we could share it now with you.
Was there something, Emily, as you were gathering all of these different stories from so many different people, that really challenged even your own faith and your own perspective about God?
Iron sharpens iron. So my faith is only strengthened by interacting with others of strong faith as well. And the voices that I had the honor of hearing and amplifying in this book share about their trials and tribulations. They share about when their faith was wavering, to your point, when it's tested on the battlefield, with questions surrounding moral injury, what that looks like, and what moral injury looks like throughout the conflicts, up through the global war on terror, and how to answer those questions. Included in these voices are ministers and chaplains. Who ministers to the minister? Colonel Doug Collins in the book told me the greatest case of PTS he ever saw was another chaplain, because it was so difficult for him to absorb so much anguish without having a way to properly release it. And to candidly, they say, ask the same questions, because these guys are combat veterans too. That's the whole point. So you're absolutely right that the stories of faith here are deep and candid and raw and eye-opening about what soldiers struggle with before, during, and after conflict, and each in their own way. From a combat medic who prayed deeply before she was in charge of all the men deploying, and she shared such an intimate story where she was crying and just praying to God. She said, God and I needed to have a conversation, and he needed to know, he needed to take care of me there so I could take care of these men. And her prayers to steady her hands and to be the best combat medic ever, so that in combat, when she did have to serve, she did fulfill not only her duty, but because her prayers were answered. And actually, in the course of writing this book, after it went to print, so it's not in the book, but she learned all these years later that those men that she worked on in the midst of battle, that all three survived. And that's the kind of blessing that has been just absolutely rewarding with this book. But yes, the stories of faith, each one very unique and personal to that specific voice.
All right. Thanks for that conversation there, Trey. Good stuff. And that's going to leave us with time on the pod for one last thing.
We've got Psalm 147:11. The Lord delights in those who fear him, who put their hope in his unfailing love. And just a reminder to be clinging to him no matter what we are facing.
Yeah, to trust that God's love is, so profound that it's able to accommodate and overcome anything that we're dealing with in this life.
Amen. All right, good spot to leave it this week on the Quick Start podcast. As always, get yourself on over to cbnnews.com, faithwire.com for more news from a Christian perspective. And don't forget, coming up tomorrow, Jesus and the Prophecies of Christmas, episode 2 on this very feed. Lord willing, that creek don't rise up on us. We'll be back Monday with more. God bless. See you then.